Hormuz. Let's just throw it out. Iran
Who knows? Yeah, right.
Money for their missing.
That's right. Welcome everyone who's coming in right now. We'll start with some current events. Sure. Yeah, Hormuz. We'll see what happens. He says he's gonna blockade it so that Iran can't charge tolls. There are a couple ships that went into the strait and went into the Persian Gulf or the Arabian Gulf, they want to call it now. We took it away from Persia since they're so bad. But we'll see if they have the capability of demining and escorting tankers through the strait. We have yet to see what Trump's threat to mine to close it off will mean.
Well, there were two destroyers that went into it
yesterday.
Yeah, that's right. We're going to demine it, and they've escorted two tankers out, I think. But you knew the negotiations fell apart.
Yeah. Not a surprise.
Not a surprise, no.
Yeah, it's unlikely that there could ever be negotiations that work with the Islamic Republic of Iran, because the Islamic Republic needs nuclear weapons to North Korea itself to make it immune from invasion. They're still immune to invasion at the moment, and that's probably what they deserve. But will anyone invade them? I don't know. I still don't think it's likely that we see some large-scale invasion force from the United States. So we'll see what happens. But if the strait can be reopened, then it gives Trump a lot more time to operate. Because if the oil flows, then less problem.
What are the Saudis in all of this?
The Saudis want to see, like the UAE, but the UAE is the most vocal. The Saudis are now moving oil on their east-west pipeline. They're sending it west to the Red Sea. The Saudis want to see Iran lose. The Saudis were among the forces loudest for the war prior to it happening, and they would like to see it won conclusively. Ironically, the best thing for Israel's integration into the region may be an Israeli tactical victory, but not a removal of the regime. Because if the regime still threatens the Gulf, then the Gulf will need to be tighter with Israel, especially if they're going to build a pipeline that will go around Hormuz, essentially, and have oil go from the UAE and to Saudi up through Jordan and Israel, and then come out at Haifa, which would make Hormuz very, much more useless. Only Kuwait and Iran itself would need Hormuz at that point. So it would make it much harder for Iran to threaten the world with closing it off. Whether or not they actually do that will probably depend on what the geopolitical situation looks like when this war ends. Though I don't think it's over yet, and I do think we'll see some return to missions by U.S. forces. Though I'm not sure if they'll be in Iran or how much so. All right, let's take a look. I need to, for those of us who are online, we're going to check out more of our Talmud. More Talmud, and we're still in Brachot 20b. We're going to first offer our blessing for the study of Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. If you say Amen, you get full credit. And here we have been discussing what women can and can't do as opposed to mitzvot, in regards to mitzvot, according to Brachot. So here we get an opinion from Rav Ada bar Ahava, right? He's the son of love. Bar Ahava. Women are obligated. Nashim chayavot b'kiddush hayom. So that specific Shabbos Kiddush. Devar Torah. So as a matter of Torah law. The Gemara asks, why? right? Kiddush is a time-bound positive mitzvah. You have to do it, affirmatively do it, and it takes place at a certain time, Shabbos. And women are exempt from all time-bound positive mitzvot. And Abaye said, it is true. It's funny, he just says, here's Amar Abaye, midrabanan. Right? So all he really says is it's from the rabbis. So what that means is they are obligated, but it's a rabbinic obligation, not a d'oraita, not a Torah obligation. And that should confuse you. Because why would the rabbis do right? Why would the rabbis make this particular injunction? Why would they? What Davka? Why this? Specifically, why this? Right? And Rava is going to say there are two problems. Right? The first is that he said Devar Torah, that it's a matter of Torah law. Right? So he doesn't, right. And it says, and furthermore, the very explanation is difficult to understand. If the sages do indeed institute ordinances in these circumstances, right? We just said, why would they do, right? So they're like, if they do, let us obligate them to fulfill all time-bound positive mitzvot by rabbinic law, even though they are exempt by Torah law. This is essentially what Reform does, in a way. We do it a little differently. We say that they're not obligated, but that exempt means that they're merely not required, but that they're able, as opposed to normally when one is patur, they don't do it. You don't do something you're exempted from. But in this case, we let them. This says, if you're going to say that they're obligated in this time-bound positive mitzvah because the rabbis say so, really, they should then be arguing that women should do all time-bound positive mitzvot. So why aren't the rabbis obligating women in all time-bound positive mitzvot? Why are they just obligating them in Kiddush? Any thoughts? Any questions about that? Okay. Okay.
Because women like wine.
Got it. They should do Kiddush because they like wine. That's good. So here we get an Ella. So not that, but rather, Rava said. So this is Rava said, Abaye, you're saying, okay, my explanation is that they are obligated, but it's just because of the rabbis. It's not from the Torah. And Rava goes, that's dumb. So this has a very specific. This is not a general rule. Remember, Rava's coming in here to say to Abaye, you're wrong. The rabbis didn't. It's not just that the rabbis required it. Because if they were doing that and they were being consistent, they'd have to do it for everything. Rather, this is a very specific situation. It doesn't apply to other situations. So he says, in the Ten Commandments in the book of Exodus, the verse said, Zachor v'shamor, right? To remember Shabbat. And in Deuteronomy, it said, Shamor. It said, observe Shabbat. Protect Shabbat. From these two variants, we can deduce that anyone included in the obligation to observe Shabbat by avoiding its desecration, a negative commandment, is also included in the mitzvah to remember Shabbat by reciting Kiddush, which is how you remember Shabbat. Since these women are included in the mitzvah to observe Shabbat, a negative mitzvah, as there's no distinction between men and women in the obligation to observe prohibitions in general, right? Negative commandments, and to refrain from the desecration of Shabbat in particular. They can't desecrate Shabbat, also a negative commandment that they're obligated in. So too, they are included in the mitzvah of remembering Shabbat.
Can you slow that down and
Yeah,
make the logic apparent?
okay.
Okay,
What, so there's an idea that in this one instance, anyone who, because Zachor and Shamor are linked in this way, anyone who's obligated to Zachor Shabbat, which is a negative, to Shamor Shabbat,
yeah,
which is a negative commandment, which is you can't desecrate, don't do this, right? So don't desecrate Shabbat, don't do a melacha, right? That's a negative commandment.
isn't Shemor you will keep or you will guard it? Isn't that positive?
They're saying no. They're saying by doing that, it's really a negative commandment
I see.
because what you're doing is not desecrating and
Okay.
such.
Okay.
And so because they are supposed to shamor, they also, because in this one instance, anyone who does one, which is everybody that's obligated in, not children and such, but women. So anyone who's obligated in shamor is also obligated in zachor, which means even though zachor is a positive time-bound mitzvah, because they're obligated in one, they're obligated in the other, because that's a general rule for anyone who's obligated in one is obligated in the other. And that's Rava's argument, which is better than just saying it's from the rabbis. This is a better logical argument for why women do this time-bound mitzvah and not others. Remember, in the end, there are like 3 that they do. Like there are a couple women are exempted into do it, like to become chayavot or chayavet individually. So now Ravina is going to come and argue with Rava, right? So Rava just gave that explanation we just went over. Ravina said to Rava, we learned in the Mishnah that women are obligated in the mitzvah of Birkat Hamazon, which we did. However, they are obligated by Torah law. Are they obligated by Torah law or merely by rabbinic law? And then, of course, the Gemara has a wonderful comment. It asks, Lamai nafka mina la'apoke rabim yadei chayavotam. What difference does it make whether it's by Torah or rabbinic law? The difference is regarding her ability to fulfill the obligations of others when reciting the blessing on their behalf. So it's interesting here, right? Ravina is saying, so which of these is it and does it matter? Right? Because the Gemara comes in to say, well, does it matter? Right? Rabbinic, Torah law, they're all binding or not binding, right? Like in the end.
Just even before we get there.
Yeah.
Isn't the obligation to say grace after meals positive time honored commandment? And they're obligated.
Remember the Mishnah originally introduced this section was talking about
the exception.
and it right, yeah. And
Okay.
this is one of the things they're required to do.
Okay.
But the Mishnah said it, which is a rabbinic text. So the Gemara is asking, is it a rabbinic injunction or a Torah law? So like,
Okay.
is that something from Torah or from the rabbis? And the Gemara makes a small point saying the difference is regarding her ability to fulfill the obligation of others, right? When one offers Kiddush or Grace or Birkat Hamazon, you're doing it for the community. In our community, we often do it all together, but usually that's not really the case. A couple of people will do it maybe, but everyone else will just say the amens and whatnot. And so they're not really doing it. Someone is doing it for them. And the rabbis, and some would argue the Torah, have some argument as to whether women can fulfill mitzvot for men. This is part of the traditional reason why women don't lead prayer. Is because women can't do mitzvot for men. It has been a traditional injunction. So it says, granted, if you say that their obligation is by Torah law, one whose obligation is by Torah law can come and fulfill the obligation of others who are obligated by Torah law. However, if you say that their obligation, the women's obligation, is by rabbinic law, then from the perspective of Torah law, women are considered to be one who is not obligated. And the general principle, which we just talked about, is that one who is not obligated to fulfill a particular mitzvah cannot fulfill the obligations of the rabbin, of the many, the public, in that mitzvah. Therefore, it is important to know what is the resolution of this dilemma. Because this very much impacts, they're saying, how we do prayer, for instance, how we do public ritual. Can a woman lead services, lead a community, do Sheva Brachot at a wedding? The answer to this question is determinative. Yes?
This is why we always have a man do kiddush for us. Is it?
We
No,
don't always have a
No.
man do kiddush for us.
I think we did. The woman lights the candles and the man does the kiddush.
So, that is why in traditional households, women light the candles and men do kiddush. In our synagogue, whoever does the assignments generally does try to find a man for kiddush and a woman for candles, but we in no way, there are some weeks where a woman does kiddush and a man does candles. Couples will come up and do it weird, like they won't always, they'll do it reverse. I don't mean weird, you know what I mean. I think it's a perfectly fine minhag. I'm not like, we must upend the systems of what, like, that's not me. So I'm fine with it. I would say in Reform communities, there's no requirement that men do kiddush and women do candles.
Yeah, in fact, Brendan lit the candles Friday night.
To be fair, we had a woman assigned, she just didn't show up. We did, Friday's a bad example because we had a woman for candles and a man for kiddush.
And she heard about it Saturday morning, apparently.
Oh, did she?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't mean to tell her name. I didn't think I said her name.
You didn't.
Okay.
You didn't, but someone else knew and.
Oh, okay, got it.
Confronted her in Kabbalah.
Okay, fair enough. But yeah, someone was supposed to be here and didn't come. But in any event, it's not like, again, in Reform, not so much. Yeah, in conservative, probably women do candles and men do kiddush.
And I guess you're gonna give me the same answer to this. I was gonna ask you, is our minhag wrong of where we all say kiddush? Should we just say amen and let the person on the beam do the kiddush?
The interesting thing is, I'll be real honest with you in presence of the internet. Nobody's gonna watch anyway. Part of the reason I like that we all do the candles together and all do the kiddush together is kind of in direct contradiction to the answer to this question, but it allows us to make sure that someone appropriate is saying both of those blessings. And part of that is knowledge, like knowing the actual words and doing them correctly. So that's why people can say the blessing for the candles before we do it. I actually prefer they didn't. I prefer they just read the English and then let us all do the blessing together, because it's not done to repeat blessings generally in Judaism traditionally. So if someone says the blessing for the candles, we really shouldn't all then do it again, but we do because I don't trust them to do it right, quite frankly. And for the case of candles, kiddush, whatever, if a man or woman or whatever, then there's a man and woman everyone's doing it together and we're kind of covering our bases. And that's me personally. That's my feeling of it. But yeah.
I've liked it that we all take it upon ourselves. We all do it together.
That's a nice way to think of it too. Probably nicer than what I said, but still. I think that's part of it for me, but just part of it. In any event, I do it mostly for making sure we say the blessing correctly, which I know that if I'm singing it, someone will be. Whereas I can't guarantee, I'm pretty sure they will, but I can't guarantee it if I'm not. That means I do candles too, not just the one that men do. I do candles as well, which is what women do. Because again, for me, it's about egalitarianism, not about gender restriction. So here's the answer. We get a tashma, which means come in here. Come, like gather around the foot of the teacher, and this is where they give you the answer. So come and hear what was taught in a baraita. We got one of those special magical baraitot that pops up, an anecdote. Anytime anyone brings up that, oh, that's just an anecdote, I go, well, the Talmud loves anecdotes. It brings them in to solve answers all the time. Maybe not the best way to do it, but that's what they're going to do here. So here comes a baraita. The baraita says, Be'emet, in truth, Amru, they said that a son may recite a blessing on behalf of his father, and a slave may recite a blessing on behalf of his master, and a woman may recite a blessing on behalf of her husband. But the sages said, may a curse come to a man who, due to his ignorance, requires his wife and children to recite a blessing on his behalf.
Is the woman on the same level as children?
Nashim, avadim, v'yeladim. Generally, women, children, and slaves share a category. In terms of obligation and mitzvot, they share a category, 100%. Same category. Women, slaves, children, same thing.
But male children do.
They're trained.
And then have the obligation, so they're
Yeah.
somewhat different than women, because women.
Well, we socialized male children. They would socialize. They would send them to learn from teachers to get ready to do all of these mitzvot. That used to be the purpose of Hebrew school, was for young women, was to teach them how to keep a kosher home, and for young men to teach them how to wrap tefillin and study Torah and do the things that they were obligated to do.
So women can never age into the responsibility, whereas children can.
Only male children, yeah.
Male children. So why are they treated the same?
Why are male and female children treated the same?
Why are females and male children treated the same?
Yeah, so female and male children are treated the same because male children haven't been trained to be Jews yet. And if we obligate them in mitzvot from the time that they're like 4 years old, we're going to have to kill them all because they're going to, sorry, I was about to curse. They're going to screw up real bad. And they're not responsible until they become bar mitzvah. Before that, it's on you. Their father is responsible for their sins. And in fact, traditionally, I don't do this with our families, but I've thought about it before for fun. Traditionally, a bar mitzvah ceremony would start with a blessing said by the child's father, in which he says, thank God for releasing me from the obligation of being responsible for this child's sins. Because it's a serious responsibility, because children suck. I love children, but like they do bad things, like they don't. So the reason that they're both, again, it's not about honor, it's about obligation. They're not obligated, though young men are trained to be ready to be obligated at 13. Young women are only trained in the things they are obligated in. Homemaking, kashrut, family purity laws, and modesty. The halacha that women are supposed to be trained on. So the training is different for young men and women. To be fair, you know this even from watching Fiddler on the Roof. The sons and the daughters have different songs. Very different, right? Right? I don't have to sing them for you. You remember them. You saw the show. So the answer is they don't treat them the same, but they're both obligated the same, and that they're not obligated. But yes, male children, when they turn 13, will become obligated in the mitzvah in time back.
And household also assumes the sins of his wife?
No, she's responsible for her own sins. To a point. Depends on very certain things. But for the most part, she's responsible for her own sins. She's a character of half agency. A slave is a character of a quarter agency, and a child is a character of no agency. If you want to get into the real breakdown of it. But technically, categorically, in terms of obligation and mitzvot, they share a category. But again, I already told you this isn't true 100% because women are obligated in some time-bound positive mitzvot. Just a couple, but that's more than slaves and children. So there's some understanding of the rabbis that women are not, they're not mental incompetence or, spiritual incompetence. They're being put on a separate level by they believe by Torah. I disagree with it. I'm saying very openly. I'm an egalitarian, but this is what the Talmud says, and we're wrestling with it.
It seems to be a matter of chauvinist choice.
In that the men of the Talmud decided that women should not be obligated, and therefore they're not. You don't think there's any interpretive art going on here, that they're not trying to parse the will of God? I don't mean to say it in a way that's, I'm just trying to say there is the argument. I'm not saying I believe it, but I think it's worth bringing up since they are our sages. They say a lot of smart things in addition to a lot of things we don't like so much. That I do believe, with complete faith, that the rabbis of the Talmud were trying to discern the will of God. I'm not saying they succeeded, just that it wasn't a conspiracy to deny women rights in the world. If anything, the rights issued to women by this book are far in excess of any society in existence at the time. That doesn't make it appropriate by 21st century standards, but by first century standards, this is the gold standard of women's rights. So it's I just want to put it in its context because is it enough for us today? No, clearly not. But to sit here and say it's all chauvinism and sexism, and I just don't think. I think that only captures 10% of the
It
argument.
just seems like it's twisted like a pretzel
to justify itself.
Yeah.
I do think a lot of the Talmud is a lot of like trying to make pegs fit into holes because we've got texts and we've got to make them all speak this, to give one coherent. This is the way, one halacha they've got to discern from all of these teachings, right? And I argue they didn't do the world's most perfect job. That there's probably a better interpretation, especially for our age today. That being said, we should address what this means. What it means here, where it says at the end, may a curse come to a man for whom Adam that sheishto. I don't want to deal with leave this ignorant stuff aside for a second. That's not bold. That's not what the Talmud says. That's the commentator inserting the interpretation of this particular man. But the text, what? Yeah.
Then I really have trouble with it. That phrase, due to ignorance, made my objection go away.
Well, yeah. So that's and they want that because they bring that's what they mean. We will get to that. I just want to read it first in its plain in the pshat, and then we can get into the commentary addition to it. Is what I mean. Not that you should ignore it. But may a curse come. Tavo me'era. So may a curse come la adam to a man she'ishto vanav, that his wife and his sons or his children. Mivarchin lo, blessed to him, almost like that they're the ones who do blessings in the house, right? In every Jewish edifice of culture you've seen, from cartoons to live action, who blesses the children? Who blesses the wife? Who blesses the house? Who does the Shabbos prayers? The guy, Tevye, or whoever, right? The male mouse in the Fievel story. It's not the lady mouse, it's the guy mouse, right? I'm just saying, this is the common in Jewish tradition that the man offers blessings. A woman is a source of blessing, but a man offers blessings. It's an interesting idea. And so here, yes, it says, may a curse come to the man who has a wife and children recite blessings instead of doing it himself. I would actually argue that when you take the commentary into effect, when you take into the idea that it's due to his ignorance, it's not just that he lets them, right? They're saying that might even be different. If he was like, oh, my sons need to practice their blessings, they can offer the kiddush this Friday night at our table. There might be an argument to that, a pedagogy. You want your kid to be ready. At 18, they're going to go out and get married, and then they're going to have to do it themselves. It's like what I told you about the orthodoxy and teaching mikvah to young women. It's like they can make up stuff about the empowerment and stuff, but eventually they have to teach them the tachlis, the details, because family purity law is very important to them. So in this case, I think this is a very interesting. I'm not sure that should make you. Why do you say it makes it more accessible to you? I'm curious.
Suppose father has a stroke and is mute.
Okay. So in other words, in that situation, yes, of course, you're right. In that situation, of course, someone else would offer a blessing.
Yeah.
And again, I hear that in it. I hear what you're saying, that this exempts certain people from it who are incapable. But of course, you must please remember also that we've already read in general, if you're incompetent because of, if you have God forbid, if you're in a coma or something, you don't have to put tefillin on every morning. Nobody has to come in and do it for you either. You become patur by the fact of your inability. So if you were to lose your ability to speak, maybe because of a stroke, you would become patur. We would exempt you from saying it like a woman or whoever. Because we don't want you to feel stressed about the obligation. We just say, guess what? It doesn't apply to you. Again, the rabbis see patur as a leniency, as a kindness.
Mm-hmm.
This is part of why I don't want you to just lean into the male rabbis made rules about ladies, therefore they are sexists and chauvinists. Because from their perspective, the women had and again, I get there's a lot to this. I'm not saying this is the way life should work today. I'm just saying women had very specific set of expectations and the way that they powered the family in the ancient Jewish home. And because of that, and because of the rules they already had to follow, and again, they dealt with kashrut because they would shop for the food, and therefore they were responsible for checking the produce and things to make sure there weren't. I mean, again, women played an important and still play an important halachic role in the life of a family. But they have time to do those things because they don't have to spend hours a day in study. They don't have to spend hours a day in prayer. They don't do those things. These are two different tasks assigned to two different genders. But I just don't want you to automatically look at it and the only thing you see be chauvinism and patriarchy, and because people like to do that, and I think it flattens the project of the rabbis, which was not to create a male-dominated life. It was to create a full Jewish life, to create a Jewish life that was workable, to take the laws and rules and lifestyle described in the Torah and the Mishnah and to synergize them and make them work so that human beings, Jews living in diaspora or in the land of Israel, could live this life. And to do that, they chose to delineate tasks in this way. And in doing so, it certainly led to obviously, if you think that's good and right, you may start to believe certain things about women and men. That's very common in today's Orthodox and Haredi world. It works for them. I'm not here to tell them it's the wrong way to live their lives. And I do want us to take seriously the words of the rabbis, not to dismiss them because we think that they're ancient and therefore anachronistic. So here we're gonna guess at some stuff, and the Gemara is gonna tell us maybe don't do that. Here's one thing we're gonna guess at. So you might say Iamrat, right? You might say, granted, that if you say that their obligation is by Torah law to do time-bound positive mitzvot women, one whose obligation is by Torah law can come and fulfill the obligation of others who are obligated in Torah law. However, if you say that their obligation is by rabbinic law, can one who is obligated by rabbinic law come and fulfill the obligation of one whose obligation is by Torah law? Everyone gets the question? Okay. The Gemara is going to say this is stupid. And according to your reasoning, is a minor obligated by Torah law to perform mitzvot? Everyone agrees that a minor is exempt by Torah law. Yet here the Baraita said that he may recite a blessing on behalf of his father. There must be another way to explain this Baraita. In other words, it might not mean what they said it meant. We know that a child is not obligated in Torah, but it said here that a child could recite a blessing on behalf of his father. If a non-obligee, that's not the word, a non-obligated person, longer but better, is able to offer on behalf of someone else, then a woman can choose to do, then it is reform. Then a woman can choose to do whatever she wants. At least in the area of blessing. So obviously, as I've always said, the rabbis seem like they might be the first Reformed Jews, but really they aren't. So if it gets there, that means that's not the case. Don't believe that. If it says, that sounds just like Reformed Judaism, then it's not what the rabbis thought, probably. Sorry. I love Reformed Judaism, I'm just saying. I diss on everybody on this. I diss on the Orthodoxy, the Reformim, the everybody. Everybody gets a little bit. That's why people watch us. Anyway, so with what are we dealing? So let's think about what this is really talking about. This is a case where his father ate a quantity of food that did not satisfy his hunger, a measure for which one is only obligated by rabbinic law to recite Birkat Hamazon. So they're going to say, this isn't a broad, general who's obligated and who's not. This is specifically about when you're at your house after Birkat Hamazon, maybe it's Shabbos or whatever, and maybe the dad didn't eat enough to satisfy his hunger. If you don't satisfy your hunger, according to the Torah, you don't have to offer a full Birkat Hamazon. But according to the rabbis, you do. So he's saying, since he's not obligated, it's just a who cares, the kid can do it then, but only in that instance. Right? In that case, one whose obligation is by rabbinic law can come and fulfill the obligation of another whose obligation is by rabbinic law. So he's saying, since the rabbis if you want to say the rabbis say that a kid can say Birkat Hamazon, they can say it only in the instance where it fulfills, where the father only has a rabbinic injunction to say it. But if he eats a full meal, the kid is not allowed to say it on his dad's behalf, because then it's a Torah law that you have to say Birkat Hamazon, and only someone obligated by the Torah to recite Birkat Hamazon can recite it, which means no women, no slaves, no kids. So this is fun. It says, after citing the halacha that one who eats a quantity of food that doesn't satisfy their hunger is obligated by rabbinic law instead of Torah law to recite Birkat Hamazon, the Gemara is going to share another, this is just a Agadah. We're just going to get some Agadah here. We're going to get some good Agadah. Okay, so Rav Avira taught, sometimes he said it in the name of Rabbi Ami. Sometimes he said it in the name of Rabbi Asi. And of course, this is fun because this is a Babylonian rabbi telling a story. Maybe it was this one Israelite, Eretz Yisrael rabbi. Maybe it was this other Eretz Yisrael rabbi. You get them confused. Those Eretz Yisrael rabbis. He lives in Babylonia. It's a long way away. He's like, these Eretz Yisrael rabbis. They said all kinds of weird mystical stuff. Before Kabbalists existed, this is what Babylonian rabbis would be like. What the rabbis of Eretz Yisrael, is like, ooh, they're fun and made up. Let's talk about what they, but it's like they didn't really take what they said that seriously. And sometimes he said it in the name of Rabbi Yassi, sometimes it was Rabbi Yami. The ministering angels said before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Master of the universe, Ribono Shel Olam. Ribono Shel Olam. I like to say the Ashkenazi version sometimes because it's Ribono Shel Olam. In your Torah it is written, the great, mighty, and awesome God who favors no one and takes no bribe. Yet you nevertheless show favor to Israel. As it is written, the Lord shall show favor to you and give you peace. Right, from the priestly benediction. He replied to them, and how can I not show favor to Israel, as I wrote for them in the Torah, and you shall eat and be satisfied, and bless the Lord your God. Meaning that there is no obligation to bless God until one is satiated. Yet they are exacting with themselves to recite grace after meals, even if they have eaten as much as a kazait or a kvetzah, as much as the weight of an olive. I don't know why it says olive bulk and egg bulk. It means the weight of an olive or the weight of an egg. Kazait, even at the weight of approximating an olive, you should say grace after meals. But that's a rabbinic injunction. Right? It's passing along. This is the story from which we get this idea that even if the rabbis are the ones who say this, but there's also the satiated factor of it, which comes from the Torah. Right? And it says they are worthy of favor. Why? Because the people of Israel go beyond the requirements of the law. Sometimes we go too far beyond the requirements of the law, and this is the tension. Today we got a lot of people who seem to not know how to apply the law without going to the extreme. I say this about, we get certain factions in the Jewish people. And we need to not be extreme.
So they're attempting to diminish the ambiguity as to whether someone is satiated or not.
Not really here. What they're trying to say is the rabbis are saying, even if you're not satisfied, because you should praise God for food, you should say some version of Birkat Hamazon whenever you eat. It's not quite as simple as this. If you only eat a kazait, you don't have to recite the full Birkat Hamazon. You can recite a much shorter version if you just have a small, not full meal. The rabbis will actually go further into what you have to eat for it to be considered a full meal. And I won't go into all the details because I'll forget something and sound like a dummy, but I can get them all for you. But the point is, they'll be more precise than this, even for who says which blessing and how. This is just giving the point of the homiletic explanation, the point of having the Agada there is just to understand that we take the stringency on ourselves of saying that we shouldn't have blessings said by those who are inappropriate to say them, because we make every meal one in which essentially you have to say the full Birkat Hamazon. If you have to say the full one, it can only be a guy.
Isn't that what I just said?
Maybe. I'm not sure. I wasn't sure, so I said what I said. And now both of our statements are recorded for posterity. And that is what the Torah is in the end, I guess. He said, I guess. Okay, we got 10 minutes. This next bit is going to be crazy inappropriate, even for the internet, probably. So we're going to learn about something Ezra the scribe talked about. We all remember who Ezra the scribe is?
Yeah, when they come back from the exile.
Ezra and Nehemiah come back, and Ezra writes a Torah, and Nehemiah leads They lead the first Torah service, public Torah service, when they return from exile in Babylon. The Babylonians lose to the Persians, and the Persians, Cyrus sends Ezra and Nehemiah and the Jews of Babylon back to the land of Israel. Some stay, some go back, etc., and so forth. But clearly here they're saying Ezra helped decide or helped determine some laws, which makes some sense, as he was the scribe who wrote the Torah down again. He must have, we take that he has some understanding of it, I guess. So he decreed that one who is ritually impure because of a seminal emission may not engage in matters of Torah until he is immersed in a mikveh and purified himself. This halacha was accepted over the course of many generations. However, many disputes arose with regard to the Torah matters to which it applies. Right? So what Torah matters does this apply to? Even if we agree that this particular nighttime whatever, which I guess is what I'm going to call it, makes one need to go to the mikveh before they can do Torah stuff. Divrei Torah. Yeah.
Saying prayers, going to synagogue.
Right. Is that Torah matters?
Yeah.
Maybe. It says, regarding this, the Mishnah says, if the time for the recitation of Shema arrived and one is impure due to a seminal emission, he may contemplate Shema in his heart, but neither recites the blessing preceding Shema nor the blessings following it. Over food, which after partaking one is obligated by Torah law to recite a blessing, which we just read about, one recites a blessing afterward, but one does not recite a blessing beforehand. So you don't do hamotzi, because the blessing recited prior to eating is a requirement by rabbinic law. And in all of these instances, Rabbi Yehuda says he recites a blessing beforehand and thereafter, in both the case of Shema and in the case of food.
Even if he's not gone to the mikveh.
So Rabbi Yehuda says he does it anyway, but that's not the majority opinion. And that's our Mishnah. So that's the original text. Then the Gemara comes in, and a rabbi named Ravina, who we just heard from before, says, that is to say, from the Mishnah, that contemplation is tantamount to speech. As if it would enter your mind that it is not, if you might think, though you shouldn't, that it is not tantamount to speech, that contemplation, hirhur, that contemplation is thinking about stuff is almost the same as speech, then why does one who is impure because of a seminal emission contemplate? Don't really know what contemplate means in this context. So I've got a thought meditation, or here's where this is: heated imagination or impure fancies, unchaste imagination, idolatrous fancy. This is who allows sinful fancies to take hold of him.
I'm thinking of a piece of advice that you very gently and carefully and respectfully gave me that has affected me, Rabbi. I had shared with you at times that when I say Shema, morning or evening, I say it in my mind. I don't move my lips. And you had said, I'm not saying you have to, but I'm just recommending, give it a try.
Yeah.
And so I do. I verbalize it now.
Good.
Is that what they're meaning by contemplation?
No, contemplation here, the word contemplation here, specifically means impure fantasies.
I see. Okay.
So you should read this as, that is to say that impure fantasies are tantamount to speech. In this case, kidibur dameh. So it's like blood things almost. Like dameh is like bloods. So like So it's like speaking bloods almost. That's a weird. It doesn't mean anything to us. Here it means it's like approaching speech, or it should be treated as if it is. A guilt thought almost is almost how I would translate it. Like what something you do though, like it moves not to action but to speech, which is bad, but not as bad as like touching somebody. But the Gemara rejects this. So it says, "But what are you saying? But what are you saying? That improper fantasies is tantamount to speech? Then, if one who is impure because of a seminal emission is permitted to fantasize, why does he not utter the words with his lips?" I don't know. The Gemara answers, "As we found at Mount Sinai." I love this because it doesn't give you any of the commentary here. If you just read this in the Aramaic, it makes no sense. It just says, it was like that at Sinai. And you're just supposed to accept, okay, that's the way it is. Here it says, as we found at Mount Sinai, there, one who had sexual relations with a woman was required to immerse himself before receiving the Torah, which was spoken and not merely thought. Here too, it was decreed that one who is impure due to a seminal emission may not recite matters of Torah out loud until he immerses himself. So it's not about what one says in their head, because we can't control those necessarily, and therefore they're not what we're talking about. It's only what actually goes out into the world, what comes from our lips. So if that answers your question about what I said about Shema, that might do right there. And Rav Chisda said that the opposite conclusion should be drawn from the Mishnah. That hirhur is not tantamount to speech, is not kidibor dameh. As if it would enter your mind that it is, then one who is impure because of a seminal emission should, from mihachila, from the beginning, ab initio, utter Shema with his lips. That's an interesting comment.
I'm not sure I understand that.
Right? Because, well, maybe uttering Shema would purify one if the lips were, if that were enough. Perhaps uttering Shema would do the work of purification. But, right? And the Gemara is going to come in and say, come on, you heard me say that and you knew that wasn't right, right? The Gemara is like, at this point, you're kind of getting the verve of this. You're getting so it says the Gemara challenges, it says, but what are you saying? That hor is not tantamount to speech? If so, why does he hear hor? Rabbi Elazar said, so that a situation will not arise where everyone is engaged in reciting Shema and he sits idly by. Right? We don't want to single him out. Embarrassment, you've heard this from me before, is really, really bad, according to the rabbis. And if he's sitting there, the only guy not reciting Shema, everybody's going to know why he's not reciting, or they're going to guess, and it's going to be bad, and it's going to distract everyone from their prayer. Better to say, forget about it. Let him do it, right? That's one idea. That's a challenge the Gemara's putting. The Gemara asks, it says, if that is the only purpose, let him study another chapter, and not specifically Shema or one of the blessings. Rav Ada bar Ahava, who we heard from before, said, it is fitting that one engage in a matter in which the community is engaged. So what you study should be, if you're going to do this, then what you study should be relevant to what everyone else is doing. A complementary piece to Shema. It shouldn't just be that. Okay, we will come back together on 21A when we gather in 2 weeks. I want to thank